Now let's look at clicking. And clicking is one set of events that are related to the mouse. So these are all considered mouse events. And I'm going to go ahead and let me change the ID of this content box to click. And I'm going to add the text click me. And then in my events.css, I'll keep my border. And let's go ahead and text align center and vertical align middle. And set the font size to 2M, make it a little bigger. Let's see how we are. Okay, so not beautiful, but it will do. And get rid of that breakpoint from before. So for our events, we're going to add this to the click box. So let's do a function called add click events. And we'll go ahead and pass in the ID of the thing that we want to add the events to. So first, let's get the box. And then let's add some events to it. So box.add event listener. And the first one we want is mouse down. And that gets triggered when you press the button. And then I'm basically going to be duplicating this code. I've already duplicated it a few times. So I'm going to turn this into a function. So let's create a function called add event. This is just going to be local right now. And it's going to take an event type. And then it's going to execute this code. And let me fix my indentation here. So that's my event listener. And then that closes off the function. So this actually should be indented. There we go. All right, so here's a function, executes this line of code. That closes off the function, that closes off add event listener. Then that closes off the add event function. So here we're going to use event type. Like so. And then we'll call add event mouse down. And then you also get an event when the user releases the mouse button. So mouse up. And then when you both click down and release, you get a click. And then if you do that twice in rapid succession, you get a double click. And that's either DBL or double. Let's see if it works or not. So then I'm going to go ahead and execute this code when the page is loaded. So let me go ahead and move this down here. I don't really need to, but it doesn't hurt. So I'm going to log the load event, and then I'm going to call my add click events and pass in the ID of the click box. So let's go ahead and reload. No errors, that's good. So I got my ready state change and my load events. So now I'm going to click down and then release. So I got my mouse down and then my mouse up and click. And if I do that again, I get the same thing. But if I double click, yeah, I'm not getting the double click. So let me try dblclick here. And reload. There. So now I got a double click. So each of these events include some properties that are useful. So let's start with the mouse down. And the first thing I get is button. So that tells me which button was clicked. So right now I'm clicking the first button, which is button 0. Let's go ahead and click the right button. And then look at the mouse down there. And that's button 2. And if I had a middle button and click that, that would be button 1. The next thing we get is this client X and client Y. And that's going to be the position of the click relative to this corner right here. So this is 0, 0. And if I click right in the very corner here, that's about 10, 10, give or take. So let's go ahead and take a look. Yeah, 9, 10. So that's about 10 pixels out. Now if I click here, I'm outside of the box, so I don't get any events from that. So client X and client Y is relative to the element, as relative to the client area of my browser window. But I also get, let's skip layer X and layer Y, they're non-standard. But I get offset X and offset Y, and that's relative to this element that I'm clicking on. So this is 0, 0. Try clicking as close to that as I possibly can. Now we see the client X and, I'm sorry, the offset X and offset Y are 0, 0. I also get page X and page Y, which is going to be relative to the page. So let me go ahead and move this down on the page. I'm going to add another div tag here. Div ID equals big space. And then in my CSS, I'm going to add big space is going to be height 1,000 pixels. So if I reload and then scroll all the way down, here's my box. And I'm going to click right on that corner there, plus or minus a pixel. So my client X is 9, because I'm 9 over, and my client Y is 159, so that's 159 pixels from there to there. My offset X and offset Y are 0 and 0 because I clicked right in the corner. But now my page X, that's still 9, but page Y is 1009. So page is relative to the whole page. And if I go ahead and add some space in front of this and then scroll, that's going to affect the page X and page Y, but not affect the client X and client Y. And then the last set of coordinates you get is screen X and screen Y, and that's relative to this corner being 0, 0. So this is right around 108 over from here and 269 down from there. If I go ahead and make this window smaller and click again in the exact same spot, now my client X and offset X and page X are all the same, but my screen X is now greater than it was before. And my screen Y should be the same because I haven't moved that, but if I shifted it down and tried it, then it would be down. So those are the coordinates that you get. And then the other things that you get are the actual element that was clicked on. So let's go ahead. So you have the buttons, you have the location, And then target is that div #click. So the div box with the ID click, that's the thing I actually clicked on. And this is a DOM object. So for example, every time, if you wanted to change this every time you clicked on it or did something else, you'd know what node to modify. You get the usual timestamp. This toElement is pointing back to the same target here. Type of event. The view is the window that this occurs in. And then this X and Y, this is just a shorthand for client X and client Y, and it's not entirely standard. So I would stick with client X and client Y. So those are the locations that you get. You also get some modifiers. So for example, you can tell whether the Alt key was pressed. So right now it wasn't pressed when I clicked, but I'm going to hold down the Alt key and click again. And then look at this mouse down event. So we see Alt key is true. Bubbles has to do with event propagation. We'll be talking about that later. And there should be a control key as well. So it's false now. I'm going to hold down the control key and click. So now I see mouse down and control key is true. And I think there's one for shift as well. So let's go. There's meta key. That's the Windows key if you have one of those. I actually don't have a Windows key on this keyboard. But I do have a shift key, so I'm going to go ahead and hold shift and click. And shift key is true. And of course you can hold down multiple keys and that will change the status of all of those flags. So this gives you pretty detailed information about exactly where the user clicked, what they clicked, and if there were any modifiers to what they clicked. Mouse up has much of the same information. So you client X, client Y, you have which button was released, target is set somewhere in here, shift key, screen X and Y, offset, basically all the same properties. All the mouse events will have these same properties. And then finally the click event is also a mouse event, and so it has the same properties as well. So obviously which of these events you choose to use is going to depend on your purpose. If you're doing a graphics program, the position is really important. If you're just responding to button clicks, it doesn't really matter the position as much. So let me double click just to get a double click event, and it's got the same stuff.